Let's get started. Our speakers will now introduce themselves.
Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, this virtual roundtable discussion between RS&H and AdventHealth on evidence-based design. I'm Jennifer Youssef, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this engaging conversation. With over 20 years dedicated to healthcare architecture, I've had the privilege of witnessing a lot of changes and not a lot of changes in this field firsthand. As a vice president of healthcare here at RS&H, I've had the honor of contributing to transformative projects that help continue to define the healthcare landscape. I'm deeply passionate about our industry, and I believe the spaces we create impact patient well-being and recovery. So I'm excited to guide this conversation alongside with my associates and our client at AdventHealth as we delve deeper into the topic of evidence-based design. Now I'm going to kick it over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. And for those who I don't know, I am a recovering architect. I now work for AdventHealth, managing construction and capital improvement projects. As you can see from my picture in the alphabet soup after my name, I am also deeply interested in evidence-based design. I am board certified healthcare architect. I'm also EDAC accredited and lead. I left those numbers off there, or letters off there too. I also have been doing this for over 20 years and feel like we have a large opportunity in front of us to move the needle towards more evidence and producing evidence. And I think that's one of the things that we can do on the owner's side is help provide an environment for that evidence to occur. I've been a consumer for a long time. I've participated in peer-reviewed articles, and I'm anxious, very anxious actually, to move this needle forward. It's desperately needed. I honestly forgot, Jennifer, who I'm supposed to kick it off to, so I'm going to take a guess at Stephen.
Yes.
So,
Good
all right,
guess.
Stephen, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Szutenbach. I am also a recovering architect. I am a senior project manager here at AdventHealth, and also have some alphabet soup behind my name. I'm like a registered architect, lead BD+C, also well certified. And I too have a great passion for both design and architecture, but also primarily in my career has been almost 100% focused in the health space and caring for people. And so really at the end of the day, what's most important to me and understanding how any process, whether it's evidence-based design or anything else, can improve the lives of the people that we serve. And so we've done that, and we're working to continue to do that better through multiple processes, including evidence-based design. So I think I pass it off to Jessica next.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. Hello, my name is Jessica Whitlock. I am an associate vice president here at RS&H. I also have a little bit of alphabet soup after my name as well. I'm a registered interior designer. I'm also very proud to be a board certified healthcare interior designer as well. I have over 12, 13 years experience, and all that is in healthcare. I basically, 13 years ago, had a chance to start healthcare, and I never looked back. Absolutely love it. I'm excited to expand our journey more into evidence-based design and really being able to gather the data and really use it to our advantage. And how do we use that to our advantage? To successfully be able to see some of those changes within our projects as we move forward, and how do we take a closer look at evidence-based design and how that can impact our future spaces for our patients. So I'll kick it off to Victoria.
Awesome, thank you. I am working on my alphabet soup. We will get there. I graduated from Texas A&M with a specialty in health systems and design. After graduation, came to Houston, and I've had the opportunity to work with some really incredible clients and some really great projects. And learning what value we can bring our clients is, I think, one of the most fascinating things about evidence-based design, right? So with that being said, I think I can go ahead and kick off into our introduction portion. All right, here we go. So before we begin the moderated portion, we're going to talk a little bit about evidence-based design and the foundational elements So let's kick it off by talking about this phrase, right? Evidence-based design. This term carries a lot of connotations. We think of words like rigor, data. It has a very white coat, rigid lens, if you will. And we hear this phrase in a variety of applications, projects, some of which can seem unattainable depending on your firm, the resources, and sometimes even the willingness of our clients. But we're here today to really pull the curtain back and have a more relaxed conversation regarding the value of evidence-based design, which at the end of the day is really all about supporting our clients and helping them make decisions that we hope will yield the best possible outcomes for everybody involved. All right, so why do we approach design in this way, or why would you approach design in this way, right? At the core of evidence-based design is this link between research and design. And the EDAC Volume 2 book, which I will reference a couple of times, has a really great graphic comparing evidence-based design and evidence-based medicine. Now, evidence-based medicine definitely yields, has a more systematic approach to the practice of medicine, and this is done by means of research and evaluation. Now, while evidence-based medicine is more of a quantitative approach, evidence-based design offers a really unique opportunity to look at both the quantitative and qualitative data. Now, evidence-based medicine will, I think, always yield a higher level of rigor just because medicine has a longer history, a larger wealth of empirical data from clinical trials and data analysis. But from the design side, we do have a growing body of rigorous study and a lot of room for improvement as the design community continues to implement and share their evidence-based design goals and results. So moving forward, diving a little bit deeper into the actual process of evidence-based design, we like to highlight that evidence-based design is not a linear process. It is really fluid and dynamic. It was organized for different applications, clients, and goals. And the Center for Health highlights the 8-step process, beginning with organizational readiness, pre-design, design, construction, and then occupancy. It's really important to note that maybe not all parts of the wheel are relevant or pertinent to your project, right? Maybe steps 4 through 8 are. It really just depends on the project data and conditions of your project. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the focused design portion of this wheel. And we're going to start that by looking at methodologies. So I like to begin with an understanding of methodologies, just because methodology is it's the set of guiding principles for your study. It's going to help underline what it is that you're looking to achieve. Evidence-based design consists of 3 different methodologies. We have quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. When we take a look at the quantitative data, we're looking at systematic investigations of tangible facts, right? This type of research allows you to objectively measure data of interest. When you're using this, you're more interested in norms and averages as opposed to personal preferences or individual performances. A good example of this would be noise levels in a nursing unit measured by a sound meter or a patient's length of stay. Now I'm going to look at the qualitative. The qualitative approach definitely has a shorter life than the quantitative. It's only been used probably about 50 years, starting in the social sciences. But the qualitative approach emphasizes multiple participant views, perspectives, and theory generation. We're definitely more focused on experiences and interactions, and it is definitely more open-minded. It's more flexible in terms of procedure, design, and measurement methods. And lastly, there is the mixed methods, which mixed methods is a combination of quantitative and qualitative. And when you're able to combine these various methods, they tend to supplement and counterbalance one another, causing triangulation, which is great. We want as much validity in our studies as we can get. And moving forward, we can take a look at research design. So how you organize your research design is unique to each project. And with that being said, a well-designed research study can effectively address the research questions and provide solid evidence. In supporting our clients, it's really crucial to understand the most important questions to ask and what type of data you would like to yield. And I've got a list of some examples from the EDAC Volume 2 book, but one example is, the just-in-time theory. If you've got a time-sensitive project, things need to be turned around quickly, you may decide to look at the just-in-time as it will yield results quicker. And moving forward, once we understand how to organize our research, we can take a look at the different data collection measurement tools. And I do strongly advocate for at least one member of your team to have an EDAC certification. It just provides a really great sense of foundational knowledge and vocabulary pertinent to utilizing this process. But measurement tools are focused on the process of data collection. When we talk about data collection, it is important to consider validity and reliability. Reliability meaning that the degree to which a measurement tool produces consistent or similar results at different times or used by different people. And really, it all depends on your project, right? There's a variety of different applications, again, noted from EDAC Volume 2, observation, questionnaire. There are many more. These are just a couple of them that are listed. And when talking about measurement tools, I also like to highlight that there are formatting factors to consider, right? Perhaps the delivery of the project is better in digital, right? Depending on the budget. Maybe it's better to deliver some of these in paper or in person if you want to have an additional observation factor associated with it. Now we've discussed methodologies, research design, and data collection tools. Next, I want us to take a look at metrics. A good goal is measurable, and in order to be measurable, we need metrics. And I always get asked, how do you decide, what you want to measure or what you want to focus on? And I always say these conversations should be really organic and be with your client specific, talking about the project goals, right? And in staying up to date with available data, as well as case studies, architects have a unique opportunity to bring this knowledge and value to our clients and discussing design opportunities that are trackable and measurable. And I always say the most important thing is to start small, right? We get into these design projects and we see a variety of things that we could fix. Sometimes focusing on one thing at a time and really trying to evaluate the improvement of that metric is better than taking on more than you can chew. And at the end of the day, it is about our clients, right? What their goals are and making sure we're all on the same page. So we may not always yield positive results. And I say that because we make these assumptions and assessments, and we hope to yield something positive. But those results are not always what we expect. And there is absolute value in understanding the variables and metrics associated with said results. When we share data, we grow as a design community. And when we get to know our own personal knowledge, I feel like we can expand the value that we're providing to our clients. One of the most important outcomes of evidence-based design is a commitment to observing the results of our design. Sometimes great, sometimes not so great. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and tee this over to Jessica to talk a little bit about a project where we've implemented some of these concepts.
Thank you, Victoria. So I know we did a high-level overview of evidence-based design and some of the metrics behind it. So thank you, Victoria, for that. And right after my section, we're going to go right into our roundtable to really start asking some of those really important questions and have really meaningful conversations around evidence-based design and some of those barriers that we face, and really taking a closer lens. So I know I am the one that's keeping you from the roundtable, so I'm going to try to speak briefly so we can allow as much time as we can for discussions, which I know is probably the biggest thing that everyone is here for. So for those of you who had the opportunity to go to HCD last fall, our team had the privilege to speak at HCD this year in regards to evidence-based design. And this webinar is kind of a spinoff from that presentation that we did at HCD. And while we were at HCD, we were able to dive really deep into two case studies that we did with AdventHealth at the Altamont campus. One of them being our MIU project that you see here on the screen. And so I want to kind of give just a high level overview of some of the things that we were able to do in this project. If you want more information though on some of the details or some other information that we may have gotten into on a deeper level when we were at HCD, please feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me, and I'm happy to share that information to you. So for the mother infant unit, we approach this more from a qualitative metric for this project. And I want to remind everyone that, I know there's a qualitative and a quantitative metric when it comes to evidence-based design, but a lot of our qualitative data then feeds the quantitative data, like HCAHPS scores. They have connection to each other. So we need to remember that when we're trying to do research or trying to gather data, whether it's broad or it's project specific or even unit specific, is that a lot of that qualitative data can then result into quantitative. And I believe that's what's really going to happen here at the mother infant unit. We were able to take basically an existing patient floor that had about 26 rooms, and they were small, tight rooms from the 1970s, and be able to convert two of the rooms to make one larger room, which is the rendering you see here on the screen. And we did that for about 10 rooms, and we converted them to 5 larger rooms. So we took 10 small rooms and converted them to 5 larger rooms to be able to give a better patient experience and a more updated level of care that they already expect from AdventHealth, but being able to actually put it within the facility as well. So with that, we were able to create a 3D mock-up of this patient room for our clinical team, where we actually constructed it with our construction partner, Brassfield and Gorey, where they were able to completely mock it up. And we were able to then create surveys and gather information from the clinical team to be able to make sure that we're designing everything to the information we already had on what is, best practice versus, or in injunction to getting what is really working well for their operational team. And we had a series of different meetings where we brought in different groups and different physicians and nurses and the executive team. And we had color-coded post-its where everyone was able to provide their feedback and attention on every single detail of this patient room over a series of about 2 weeks. We took that data and put it into a complete presentation for the AdventHealth team to be able to let them know these are things that we're seeing, and here's how we're going to adjust the design to make sure we're really responding well to the clinical team, and also providing something to them that we know is going to work towards their HCAHPS scores. In addition to that, we also did something similar with their furniture. We had a huge furniture fair where we created surveys, and we brought in multiple pieces of furniture. The clinical team, the EVS team, the executive team, everyone came through to be able to provide thought and input on those pieces of furniture. So we know that we could gather that information and be able to take it to the executive team and say, okay, here are the top pieces, here's why, and this is going to be our recommendation for best choice based off of this exercise and survey that we were able to put together from a qualitative perspective. So it was a really great exercise to be able to put into place. And we also were able to highlight that during our seminar at HCD, where we were talking about a small practice approach to kicking off evidence-based design and how we're implementing that in some of our projects today. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and kick off our roundtable discussion so we can start getting down and dirty into our conversations around evidence-based design. Welcome back, everybody.
Yes. So I'm going to kick it off to you first, Stephen.
Sure.
What does evidence-based design mean to you? And how do you use it at AdventHealth?
Well, number one, thank you, Jessica, for that really great setup, because I was lucky enough to work with you and the Brassfield and RS&H and TLC team on the MIU project at Altamont. And, I think, what does it mean to me really is, it's an interesting question to me. One is that being an architect, I can say this without any malice. I had the absolute honor of being on thesis juries, master's thesis juries for graduating architects at a local university recently, and the work was phenomenal. But what I was really struck by was the fact that we as architects do really, really, really well in the qualitative arena. we understand and we are able to kind of get our heads around, you know, how do we kind of take different inputs and qualitative inputs, but we are not very good at quantitative things. I mean, dimensions and, you know, building sizes, yeah, we can take care of that. But from a research standpoint, that's kind of not where our education lies. And so I think what is interesting about evidence-based design, having been on both sides of the table, both as the architect and the client, I think that evidence-based design is an untapped resource that I think that both the industry and also the industry, our architectural industry, but also on the client side that is not quite yet fully utilized, because I think sometimes firms don't necessarily know how to do the qualitative or the quantitative, even though we are fully, user groups are quantitative or qualitative, excuse me, are qualitative data gathering, right? That is basically, you know, qualitative data gathering. But I think that we don't always know how to put this into practice. And so I think that sometimes it can be at a risk. It can be risky for us to use that term if we don't have the muscle behind how to put it in practice. And so I think it's really important that when we do talk about evidence-based design, we're talking about it truly with rigor, and putting the 8 steps: define, find, you know, interpret, create, hypothesize, putting that into the practice. And so some things that I really appreciated about our MIU work at Altamont. I wish you'd put up a picture of the mock-up where we had all of the users put up the Post-it notes. Everyone had a different type of user, had different colors, and we collated that into a really kind of powerful document that allowed us to see, okay, well, seven distinct people are saying X, Y, and Z, and that comes from 2 or 3 different types of user, whether it's an EVS person, or whether that's a nurse, or whether that's a physician, or whether that's, you know, a manager, you know. And I think that was really, really powerful to kind of see how things began to relate to each other. So I'm sort of answering the second part of the question, how we use it at AdventHealth. We've obviously used it on this project. We've used it on other projects. We just now finished a post-occupancy study for another project of ours at the Orlando campus. And we had our architectural partner and our contracting partner go and survey multiple units in multiple of our towers to see how different types of layouts on each of these floors really impacted. What's very interesting to me about the impact of these is that I think people adjust to whatever they have. Mm-hmm. And that's the struggle with qualitative studies, is that what they have right now generally is what they're going to say is right, or what they're used to is what they're going to say is the best way to go about it. So human nature is really hard to account for in qualitative studies, because we are creatures of habit. So that was a long answer to 2 very short questions, but thank you.
That was great. This question is for you, Michael. How can evidence-based design principles be integrated into planning and development of new projects? And this one I'm really interested in because it's coming from, you know, your client perspective now.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the terms I heard Stephen say is risky. And if I can elaborate a little further, I think as an architect, we are encouraged and often and experiment, and we call it a practice, right? We try new things, we recommend new things, but on our side of the table, we are risk adverse. We absolutely aren't interested in trying new things. We want to do things that are vetted and proven. And to that point, if there's no evidence to support the claims that you're making, then we're probably less likely to do it, right? And so how could we implement it? Prove it, right? Prove it first. And that's easy. That's actually fairly easily done with this, with the research that's already out there. I'm terrible at remembering names, but there was a study done out of Clemson where they talked about or maybe it was A&M. It might have been A&M. It's one of those two, where they talked about the importance of daylight in patient rooms, right? And it's become almost anecdotal and not supported by the evidence, right? Like that feels like something that makes sense, so we're going to do that, and so much so that it's now an FGI and it's code required and all that stuff. But all light isn't equal, right? So just having daylight isn't the same as having daylight in views. And what are the improvements in patient, not just satisfaction, but actual physiology, right? And if you go way back to Alvar Aalto and the sanatoriums that he was designing, TB units that he was designing around getting access to daylight, they proved that hours of daylight improved the medical condition, right? So it's that kind of thing, the evidence that we need to see, because we are risk adverse. So if we want that integrated into our projects and our planning, we need the evidence. It just can't be, well, this is what we've done elsewhere. Well, that's great, but we're not elsewhere, right? We want to understand how you're justifying what you're doing.
Yeah, you're relying on your design team and
all day, every day, all day, every day.
That data to you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's a responsibility, I think, of our design community, is to be able to, in all the different firms, doesn't really matter who you're with, that we don't take that lightly, that we need to go out there and get that information, either know how to get that data and be able to implement it, or create our own data ourselves and bringing that to our client as a part of the fact that we're, you're a trusted advisor.
Right.
And helping you make those decisions. That's what you're relying on us to do.
So if I can expand my answer to that question, Jennifer, I think one of the things that the Center for Health Design has in place, something that I think they still call it the Pebble Project, and that's the idea that you are going to propose or theorize a new solution to an existing problem. And instead of simply bringing the answer to us and saying, here's the proof, you should do this, we think this is the proof. Do you have an opportunity to test it in your facility, right? And that's really what the Pebble Project's about. And I think that's the kind of thing that we are interested in also. So it isn't only you all bringing this to us. It is what problems we have now that maybe you can help us solve. And then by solving it, add to the amount of data that's out there that would help others, right? That's our ultimate goal, is to improve the outcomes of our patients and our staff, truthfully, and how they experience life in our spaces. And so that's, yeah, I don't know, I'm wordsmithing now, but go ahead.
So I'm going to throw this next question over to Stephen, and it's going back to that MIU project.
Sure.
So how did your team go about the idea of improving what was there? And what did that conversation look like at a higher level? Once once the idea came to renovate, and you guys did something interesting where you removed beds. You made that department smaller.
Yeah, we did. I think that there are a couple things we did. Number one, this unit had been working in a 1972 tower with they were code compliant in 1972. So I think almost anything that we would have done for them, they would have been like, yes, absolutely, it's better. So I'm going to say the bar was low. But I think what was great saying, well, we don't just want to make it better, we want to make it right. And we want to make it work as an optimized for you. And so part of that was, thinking about data, not just from a, design standpoint, but we had to figure out what is the right number of rooms for this unit. We had to get the data of volumes over the past 5 years and figure out we did not make every room larger, but we did renovate every room. But so how do we figure out, number one, what is the optimal size for the community to serve this community that we're providing OB care for, and then make sure that we're not downsizing the unit to the point where we're gonna have volume and length of stay and backups, struggles. So that was the first thing. The second thing the design team that really was able to do is we didn't start out with a plan. We didn't start out with, okay, here, and I think that's what we often do in the design team. Like, we think everything is solvable by a drawing or a design or an aesthetic of some sort. And I think that can be a mistake. I fall into that all the time. Like, hey, I have an idea. Let me show you. And people get excited by that. But we started out with first principles. We said, okay, what is the purpose of these rooms? And actually, one of the hardest things about this whole project is, I think, Jessica, correct me, I think at the end of the project, we had 7 distinct types of rooms.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So, like, we didn't have like one patient room. We literally had to design 7 patient rooms to be optimized. If we'd had unlimited funds, we probably would have mocked up all 7 types, or space, but we did not have space or funds for that. So we started out by saying, okay, let's look at our new room type, which is the 2 rooms becoming 1. And how do we make this kind of our optimal, best case scenario? That's when we mocked up. Then we mocked it up with, we didn't do materials, but we mocked it up with everything other than kind of the final finished materials. And we had physicians, doctors, physicians have done the same thing. Physicians, nurses, administrators, everyone come and spend time in it. We had multiple long work sessions in there. And that was after we kind of did kind of a front beginning survey and say, well, what does it look like? What does your ideal look like? And then from there, we began to refine it more. And then what we tried to do with the other 6 other patient room types is, well, how do we refine this data that we have here into these, other, Russian doll diminishing size rooms? How do we kind of make these strategies work in those other rooms to maximize patient flow, help our clinicians work best? And what's interesting is, so we are about to finish phase 3 of 4 of this project. Phase 1 is now open, and what's interesting is there are things that we're learning about that we didn't think about, that no one thought about. But they're, by and large, the decisions that we made are being validated by the users, but also by the clinicians. They are absolutely, even though the new rooms are the same, some of the new rooms are the exact same size as the unrenovated rooms right now. They are always trying to put patients in the new rooms because they flow better, they work better, and they're better for both patients and staff.
And I'd like to also kind of add on to that, going back to the conversation around that mock-up. Another thing that we made sure that we had in that room is every piece of, as much as we could, piece of equipment, furniture, yes, that we could potentially put in there, because we went down to the details, even where the sharps container was going to be hung on the wall. And I do think that a lot of people, some of those things can be an oversight, and then when you go to install them on site, it's just an uncoordinated, mess. And so that is a huge step in the operational flow for a clinician team of where that is stored, what zone that's in the clinical zone. Also, them being able to kind of see how that furniture is going to be in the space to scale, what it's going to feel like, how much space they have. And it's just more of a better visual. So I would really encourage anyone that's doing any type of full-scale mock-up of a room to make sure you have, as much as you can, all your components available to be able to go inside that mock-up to have the best view you can, the more realistic view you can, as you're starting to, bring a lot of that data to the surface.
One other tag on to that is that if your budget allows it, I recommend doing a full mock-up with finishes too, because I think that actually makes a difference. Finishes, doors, everything else. There are things that you find, as much as all of us do this every day, every project has little pitfalls. You're like, wow, that was, like, for example, we had a situation on this where the door swing, it's complicated, but the door swing and the bassinet had an issue together. And so we, that because we didn't actually have a full door that swung, there are things you just kind of, don't think about necessarily when you're doing that. And so, like, we had to kind of adjust that in the field and figure out a solution after the fact, which is okay. We're all problem solvers, but, I think as close to the final product as you can possibly afford, I think, is always best, especially if you're doing really, a tower with, 30 of the same kind of room,
Mhm.
do a full mock-up.
Yes.
Because that's going to give you the most evidence, actually.
Mhm.
Excellent. So my next question is going to be for Michael. So what's your opinion on a post-occupancy evaluation? And what does that look like for you? And do you actually use them?
So we do use them. Matter of fact, Stephen just talked about one we conducted recently, and he can talk more intelligently about the results of that. What's my opinion of them? Well, they're only as useful as the responses you get, right? And so if you send out 100 surveys and you got 30 back, that's not really useful, right? Because you're not getting a large enough sample size. So you need to make sure you get a large enough sample size to have any real value. But I also think it isn't an isolated event, meaning you do one, maybe 6 months post occupancy, maybe 1 year post occupancy, maybe 5 year post occupancy or whatever, because the thing that is constant is change. Change is always present. And it's not just in the room or the way we conduct or we provide medicine or we provide care. It's also in our staff. Right? Like we have staff turnover, and I don't mean like they hate it here or they love it here. We have staff who advance quickly and they move on to different positions, and so we're bringing new folks in. Well, the folks we're bringing in were trained differently, so all the decisions we made around that department, around the people who were running that department at that time, have shifted. And so if the decisions were made rooted in evidence and best practices, right? And here we go again, right? Then they're probably going to be a seamless transition in the way we provide care, and the new folks coming in are just going to be able to pick up and run. I'm talking a little bit about standardization, but I'm also talking about the results of prior POEs and how they influence the changes in our room design, in our operational flow. So we absolutely use them. We find great value in them, provided they are provided we get them back in large enough return to make any value. I don't know if I got where you wanted to go with that, but
No, I think so.
Yeah.
Can I add to that too?
Yeah.
So there's two things. One is that PUEs are extraordinarily useful. I'm going to put a call out to all our architectural partners out there that I think that there's a missing opportunity for a service line to offer of just a really kind of dedicated, we do POEs, we do evidence-based design. I think having a really rigorous team that does that, I think is an opportunity. Because as I said, I think we as architects generally aren't trained or hardwired to do this kind of work. The big struggle that we have is, again, our clinical staff are busy. They're really, really busy. And so as much as you try to put a survey in front of them, they're like, I have 30 seconds. And so so designing it in a way that you can engage your clinical staff and get an appropriate amount of data set that's appropriate to make conclusions off of is really important, number one. Number two, the other thing that I was going to say is that I find it so interesting, maybe a little bit meta, that so much of what we do, we think is, based on evidence-based evidence. And so the POE that we just completed, one of the questions we asked was, we had one unit where we had built distributed patient nursing stations. So we had like 3 nursing stations on a unit because we wanted to have nurses more distributed around, closer to their patients. And that's what, at the time, the clinicians were telling us that's what they wanted, better for the patients. They hate it. And they all gather at one nurse station because we are pack animals, right? We want to be around our people. And so like what that ended up happening is that you end up with like this one nurse station that's completely overloaded, and then 2 empty workstations, right? So and it's not like we made that decision in a vacuum, right? We didn't make the decision to make 3 nurse stations because Mr. and Mrs. Architect were like, I want 3. It was like, oh, this is gonna be better for visibility, and we're trying to meet the guideline, kind of intention of kind of distributing caregivers around the unit. And yet, as much as we want to think that we have power over people with our design, we don't. I mean, how many times have those of us in this room gone to a space that we've designed and be like, that's not being used how it's designed.
Yes.
Don't you know you don't have to put command strips on the door because there's magnets next to it for all your, I mean, like,
Please don't do that.
no matter what it is, we've all seen this, right? So
Yeah.
I think what we have to do is figure out what is the best way to design it in a way that is the most flexible.
Mhm.
Because-
and intuitive, right?
Yes.
So you just hit a point on that. At least I think I was trying to make is, our folks are constantly moving on and into better roles in different places and whatever. And so we go through what we call a go live process. So at the end of every capital improvement, we take a requisite amount of time, depending on the complexity of the project, to onboard the team, right? To say, okay, here's your new space. This is how you use it, whatever. That's good for about 3 months. And then 3 to 6 months, you have an entirely new team who didn't go through that process. And they're like, I don't know where to find things. I don't know where things are. And so, it has to be intuitive. It has to be flexible. That's another keyword that should be coming up more often. But yeah, I totally agree. And I also think that, again, we're happy to be a test bed, but we also want it to be a proven strategy. We don't want to. We are risk adverse.
This is a great segue. So at ASHI PDC, I attended a roundtable and 3 owners were speaking. And one thing they did, which I thought was really interesting, was they put a call out to
Mhm.
architects to bring them data,
Yeah.
right? To support their ideas and to support these changes.
Right.
How often are people bringing you data?
Probably, and maybe Steve and I might have a different answer. Not as often as we'd like,
Mhm.
right? I think we would like more, and often we are pressed between time to install and delivery and make operational, right? But at the same time, we need enough time to test the things that we just did, so we don't go live and has something happened and we didn't foresee it, right? So we get some and we get a good amount, but we need more. We want more data, and because these things aren't always free, right? Sometimes these things are a cost. The first cost is fairly large, and we have to justify to our superiors and our leadership, hey, we know this is X, right? But if you pay X, the ROI is less than 2 years, and we're going to see patient improvements. We're going to see staff improvements, efficiency improvements, like X, whatever. But again, we don't have the time to pull that data together. We need that data presented to us, and then we can bring the financial piece of it.
I think also, and kind of spinning off of that, is these conversations need to happen earlier, right? Because they have to not only be budgeted for, but they have to be scheduled for. And they have to be talked about so that when we're creating the design schedule, we're fitting that opportunity for mock-ups or testing or whatever that looks like within the project, if it's project specific. I think it would be all great and dandy if we're able to do these side projects of trying to find data, but we know that that's not reality. Reality is
Right.
a lot of times that we're trying to find data or provide data or prove data is within a project, because that's what is driving us to get that information. And so we can have these conversations earlier so that you guys are in a situation well positioned to be able to go and ask for that money, or to be able to make sure we allocate the right funds around it. And also it puts us in a good position to be able to make sure we're providing that within the overall design schedule. So we're not, trying to catch it, during design and then it just keeps, taking us off track. So I can't express enough that some of these conversations have to happen early on for it to work the way that we need it to.
I think it's an interesting symbiosis that needs to begin to happening more, meaning that that I think we need the design community to be the gatherers of the data, to help us gather the data, but you need, you know, hospitals to help you have access to do that. I think that we all have great intentions of doing POEs, you know, a year after our projects are done, but I think that we don't often do that. You know, we get busy, we forget about it. There's money, it costs something to do that. And so what tends to happen, I think, is that we don't do POEs until like all of a sudden we have a need to, like 10 years later, like, oh, well, is this working, right? You know, and so we don't really have maybe a strict or a rigorous process in place to really kind of capture that data, both on the hospital side, but also on the architect side. I mean, I think that I think architects and designers can begin to build their data by building POEs into their fees. Originally say, we're going to do POEs because we need it ourselves. This is actually virtuous for us because it's going to help us, you know, and it'll help you see if something's working or not. You know, and so I think that is something that data, I think, is really the gold that we're looking for. But I think it is also, it's a rare commodity in this, you know, in the healthcare, you know, design space.
It is, and I saw a comment come through saying data is expensive. What recommendations do we have? And I will tell you from my own experience, public-private partnerships are a way to go. I know that the federal government has offered several grants on collecting data in the architecture space. And I know that there are quite a few universities. I mentioned a few of them, Clemson, Texas A&M, I think K-State, and then the school in Ohio. Kent State. That's what I meant. So there's quite a few schools that are very interested in partnering, but you know, for them, it has to get beyond hypothetical. They need a real live place to do this. We're the live place to do it, but we can't spend the money to collect the data. They can collect the data probably at a discounted rate, and the architect is the one who's sort of collating all of this, right? So I think it is not incumbent on any one entity. I think Stephen hit the nail on the head. I think it's a symbiotic relationship between multiple entities, and I think, you know, some owners would be willing to pay a small premium if it means that they're going to get better products or out of the development of their projects. I'll say one other thing. You know, I've worked for quite a few firms. One firm was a member of the advisory board, and there's a large repository of data there that you simply can consume. I left that firm, went to a different firm, and they weren't members, and so that was like, you know, having the air pulled out of the room for me. It was tough, and so I had though relationships at different schools. David Allison got tired of me at Clemson, and so, you know, just reach out to the people that you know, and they're more than happy to help you do if nothing else, a peer review search, and to try to find a journal search to try to find some data that's applicable to your project. So there's a couple ideas.
And I'd like to double down on your statement, Michael, you know, and this came from Vicky. So Vicky, you know, feel free to reach out to us, and because I believe that the community should be helping each other in this.
100%.
And so, you know, if there's something you're looking for, you know, by all means, ask us, you know, if we have access to that data or whatever you're looking for. We're happy to share, because this is about making. We're all passionate about this, I think, on the call, and probably the people who are viewing, and yeah, and we would love to be part of that knowledge sharing. We've got probably time for one more question, and then we have another. Well, actually, I'm going to go to the chat because. So, did you guys get any patient consumer input on the markup, or can you describe what your input was on the mockup for the MIU?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We had a lot of conversation about this actually. And you know, we didn't end up bringing in a patient, and we did not end up bringing in like a future patient. So there was a lot of there are lots of kind of considerations about this, and at the time, I think it would have been a really interesting thing to have done. But I think what's complicated about that is that it's a very particular unit. It's an OB unit, so there's, you know, you could bring in someone who's pregnant and is going to be, but most of the time it's I think the conversation at the time was that it was a more technical conversation with the clinicians, and they didn't want to kind of muddy that water. So and that's kind of where, you know, that was the leadership directive, and whether that's, I think there are pros and cons to both sides of doing that. So I think one of the big concerns was, like, you know, this area wasn't going to be, you know, renovated in time for most of these patients to see this. And so they were going to be like, well, we don't want them to feel like they're not getting, you know, the new in time for that. So, but it's a really good question.
It would be very interesting, though, to be in a position to be able to bring in a patient consumer into a study like that, especially a mock-up driven. And if anyone has had an opportunity to do that, I would love to hear more about it and how you got that process started and how you went about including them, because I feel like it's a completely different avenue, and it's a completely different process of involving more of the patient consumer than it is involving the clinical team, design team, and executive team. I think there's a different approach that you would have to go through to be able to make that happen. So I think that's very interesting. So thank you for that question.
It's a really interesting, actually. So this morning I was just in a meeting with the director of that unit, and she mentioned to me that they are when they're pretty full right now. So they've got patients in new rooms and old rooms, and they are moving. As soon as a new room will open up, they will move the patients from the old room to the new room. And so I'm really curious. I think it'd be really curious, interesting to hear what the reaction is between the two. Actually, I think that'd be an interesting kind of data point.
Yeah, that sounds like a very in the future field trip for us, I feel like.
Exactly.
I can share with you that we've had both pre and post. We call them patient advocates as part of our projects. Pre, they weren't necessarily making design decisions. They were simply reacting to design decisions that have already been made. And then post were what it sounds like. You know, so I thought I read somewhere earlier that, you know, do we survey the patients in addition to the staff? And absolutely, the patients get surveyed in addition to staff and facilities, because if our facilities folks need to be able to maintain these things that we come up with. And if they can't maintain them, or the again, it isn't intuitive, then they don't get maintained and patients are dissatisfied. So patient satisfaction is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Mike, because I do feel like when teams are selecting and designing for different projects, the facilities team always gets left out for the most case. And I feel like that is such a vital team to be able to have come in and be able to give their recommendations, and to be able to tell the team, yes, that's something that's we're used to maintaining, or or here's why this won't work, or here's why it's kind of a challenge for us, especially with furniture. I really think that they don't really get a good glimpse of it, and the next thing you know, they're the ones maintaining it, and
or throwing it away when they realize they can't maintain it.
Exactly.
And it could be simply refurbished, but they just throw it away, right?
Yeah. So always remember your facilities team.
Yeah, that's for all the architects who are listening.
Yes.
They're like, how do I talk to my owner about this? Just tell them, hey, are we going to talk to facilities? Are we going to talk to EVS or whatever they call them in there?
Yeah.
Yes, that's okay. You're allowed to ask those questions, please.
And
we're pretty smart, but we're not that smart.
We have probably time for one more question. And this is for both you and Mike and Stephen. Sorry, I'm looking at both of y'all. So what role does technology play in advancing EBD, or what have you seen?
Ooh, what have we seen? Well,
I know it's a trick.
Yeah, you know, I guess I have two responses. You know, back in grad school days, when I was the guy counting people sitting up and standing down from a waiting room to see how many actually waiting room chairs they needed. I mean, that's the kind of I go way back. Like, I've been collecting data for a long time.
2.
Yeah. No, that's it. So I think I think, you know, in that particular example, when you have field observations as part of your study, right? And you can use technology to count seats or butts and seats versus someone stationed there watching people get up and get down. That's a really critical piece of technology that added value to the data collection sphere. That's certainly part of it. Digitized surveys. I know it sounds dumb, but that's a huge bonus, right? Over paper surveys that, oh, I got to fill it out. I don't have a pen. Who do I give it to when I'm done? EVS comes in, they see a survey laying on the table, like, they throw it away, right? No, not our EVS. They would never do that. But you see what I mean? So I think technology has actually has added a lot of value. But it is also for some of our patient population, it also is a roadblock, right? They don't know how to use the technology, and therefore they don't do it. So it's a double-edged sword, I guess.
I think that's Mike, that's very well said, and I don't have a whole lot to add to that. But in the POE that we just finished in Orlando, they utilized SurveyMonkey, and Hun Brady was our team that worked on that. And they did a great job on that in a very tight window. So that kudos to them as well. They in SurveyMonkey, like what was great about that, to your point, was that they immediately had a platform in which they could slice and dice the data differently and look at, you know, how different responses led to, like, by unit, whether it's by unit or by shift or by, you know, and it was a really interesting kind of easier way than kind of having these paper studies. I think it's really helpful. There's all kinds of things technologically that can help us, monitoring systems in rooms. But, you know, I'm always reminded, though, that sometimes analog is best. You know, I was having a conversation with a woman in charge of parking today, and we have, you know, you guys have all seen those parking systems that have the red and green lights that are really great, and that tell you, you know, how those work. And, you know, she was telling me how often they have to repair those things. and so, like, I think that sometimes technology is a great idea until it breaks. And then now you have a dead piece of technology. So sometimes the best technology is the technology of our feet, and going our feet and eyes and going to look and watch and observe. And that in some ways is there's no replacement for that.
It also allows for more conversations and deeper conversations when you're able to do that too, because you're not really sure what else could come out of that one answer to that one question unless you're there with that person. And we've actually, see more information come out to that. So I would agree with you. There's definitely major pros and cons.
Excellent. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to throw my email into the chat. So for anyone who's listening, feel free to reach out to us and ask any questions. I really want to thank our guest panelists. Thank you, Mike and Stephen, for joining us today. We really appreciate y'all joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.